Hello RWBY fans, welcome to another video on my channel discussing another RWBY topic. You guys seem to really enjoy the last one where we talked about a criticism video and I gave my viewpoints on it. And I will be discussing other individuals in the future as well as for criticisms, but that's for another day. Today we will be discussing the character that has enraged a lot of people in the fan base, while at the same time disappointed others, James Ironwood. Now, the main conversation around Ironwood after Volume 8 is his dramatic shift from a stubborn military general to a murderous psychopath, and how that shift seemed to come out of nowhere. If you were to watch Volume 7 from chapters 1 to 10, you would say that while Ironwood was very set in his ways, he still had good intentions, and you would be correct. But you also know that after Volume 7, Chapter 11, Gravity, Ironwood starts to behave irrationally and doing things only he thinks is right, regardless of the damage he may cause. Obviously, this change came as a surprise to a lot of people in the fandom, and for good reason. I believe this change is one of the most organic character changes in RWBY. The show has done this a few times already. The first time was Adam Taurus. If you remember the first few times we see Adam on screen, he is calm and collected. He is a great strategist. However, the second he sees Blake again, he starts to slip away from that and tries to correct a problem that he feels Blake caused by leaving the White Fang. As time goes on, we see him slip further and further into that, which ends in him being overly confident and getting killed. Now, why am I bringing up Adam in an Ironwood video? Well, it's because Adam's character shift wasn't sudden, it was gradual. The same thing applies to Ironwood. Let's go back to Volumes 2 and 3, Ironwood, before we discuss current Ironwood. Back in Volume 2, when he was first introduced, we see that him and Glinda have a tense relationship because while he is able to put on a smile and be a team player, he always holds people at an arm's length, never fully trusting them. Glinda even says it herself during their conversation in Chapter 10 of Volume 2. She tells him, "It's high time you stop discussing trust and start showing it." Of course, him being hesitant in the context of that conversation was fair, given that they were talking about Ozpin, and we all know how many secrets Oz had before Volume 6. But this conversation shows that even though he ended up being right, he struggled with fully trusting people for years, decades even. But now, let's discuss the one thing people forgot about Ironwood that started in Volume 2 and was still present within him during Volumes 8, 7, and 8. The Black Queen. Before we dive into that, if it's been a while since you've seen Volume 2 or you just need a quick refresher on the events of that volume, here's a brief summary. In Volume 2 of RWBY, we are introduced to James Ironwood, headmaster of Atlas Academy. In his introduction, we see him be very cordial to Ozpin as they work together for years. During Ironwood's visit to Beacon, he has a public demonstration for two new Atlesian inventions, the Atlesian Knight 2.0 and the Atlesian Paladin. We will get back to the Knights in a bit, but we know that the Paladin is used in the next episode, Painting the Town, by Roman Torchwick. Next is the dance, which is where the virus comes in. During the dance, Cinder sneaks into the CCT tower and plants the Black Queen virus, which she received from her associate Arthur Watts. No one, not even the audience, knew it yet, but Cinder planting the virus lit the fuse on a bomb that would eventually explode and become the event known as the Fall of Beacon. Moving on from Volume 2, we have Volume 3, and this is where Ironwood's eventual downfall would start. In Volume 3, we notice that when Ironwood places his scroll on Ozpin's desk to show his fleet around Beacon, it has become infected with the virus as shown when he removes the scroll later in the scene. This in turn gave Cinder access to Ironwood's ships as well as access to the Atlesian Knights. Now, I want you to really think about those events for a second. Ironwood was a headmaster, a general, and a lieutenant to Ozpin for years and years. Everything was going great, but in a single day, his entire world literally crumbled around him. His knights were killing civilians, he lost control of his fleet, an Atlas secret was revealed to all of Remnant, and your commander and confidant was killed. all in a single day. Hell, in a single night, over the span of a couple of hours. So with all of that in perspective, let's talk about his decisions in Volume 4 that indirectly made our hero's journey harder in Volumes 5 and 6. In Volume 4, we are introduced to Ironwood 6 months after the fall of Beacon. Tensions between kingdoms are at an all-time high, and with global communications being taken down by Cinder, there is no way to know what is happening in other kingdoms. During the beginning of the volume, Ironwood is just how you remember him, calm and collected. Hell, he's the one who gave Yang her original robotic arm, if you've got that plot point. He even offers Weiss a place in Atlas Academy when the new semester starts in a few months. But wait a minute, isn't this a video about Ironwood changing for the worse and how it makes sense in the show? Well, yes it is. I'm just pointing out the good things that Ironwood did in the show before we talk about the questionable things he did, because if I don't, I'll get a bunch of actually people in the comments trying to tell me more about a series that I have damn near encyclopedic knowledge about. But anyway, let's get into Ironwood's questionable behavior in the Volume 4 finale. So, in the finale, we see Ironwood in Jacques Schnee's office, and Jacques is pushing Ironwood on why he called for a dust embargo. This is the only time I will say this sentence, but Jacques has a valid point here. Like I said earlier, Volume 4 takes place 6 months after the fall of Beacon. If you're wondering how I got 6 months, go watch my RWBY timeline video. I'll link it down below. Anyway, we see in the premiere for Volume 4 that Team Ranger, Ruby Rose, Nora Valkyrie, Jean Arc, and Lyren bought dust from the village they were in, and Nora specifically says, "Locked and loaded. Thank you, Schnee Dust Company." So we know that the embargo hasn't taken effect yet. So why did he wait 6 months and then suddenly decide that the embargo was a good idea? Well, that's because of his other plan, closing the Atlas borders, effectively shutting Atlas off from the rest of Remnant. Good job, General. Okay, jokes aside, let me tell you the quote from the episode so you can fully grasp what Ironwood is doing. Jacques tells Ironwood that he's being paranoid, and Ironwood responds, "And for good reason," before slamming his fist into Jacques' desk. We cut into the room and Ironwood says, "If only Osmond had listened to me from the start." Jacques puts his hands up and says, "You need to get a grip." And Ironwood responds, "That's exactly what I'm doing. That's why by this time next week, the Kingdom of Atlas will be officially closing its borders. No one in, no one out." His response to public unrest is to lock up the kingdom and carry on business as usual. Let's now talk about the widespread effects this decision had on the world, shall we? We see the effects of the border closing in Volume 6, when the main cast tries to go through the Argus military base, only to be denied by Cordovan. Let me remind you guys of the attitude the Atlas military has about the rest of Remnant. RWBY tells Cordovan, "We know Atlas had nothing to do with the fall of Beacon. We were there." Which Weiss follows up with, "No one is happy about the border closing or embargo, but we know that General Ironwood is just worried." And Cordovan responds, "The General is no coward. Atlas is strong. If the other kingdoms want to make us their enemy, then so be it. Atlas will prevail." Following the time of year, from the end of Volume 4 to the end of Volume 5, the border has been closed for about 3 to 4 months, considering the premiere of Volume 6 is weeks after the finale of Volume 5, and it takes them about 2 days to get to Argus. Anyway, this shows that Ironwood did not take into account how far the effects of closing the Atlas borders would reach. Now we get to the heart of it all. Volume 7. Buckle up, y'all. Alright, so, in Volume 7, we see that Ironwood took Jacques' advice and ran with it, because Mantle is not in a great place as a direct result of Ironwood. By the time Volume 7 rolls around, we are approaching the 1-year anniversary of the fall. So for a year, Ironwood has been working behind the scenes to make his own faction of trusted colleagues after Osmond disappeared. Now, I know the big question people had during Volume 7. That being, why did the main cast choose to lie to Ironwood about the lamp? Well, let's see, shall we? Our heroes arrive in Mantle only to see Ironwood on a giant screen over the city, constantly repeating messages of how quote-unquote safe the kingdom is. We also see Winter talking about a curfew and how people are punished for disregarding it. So, if you were the main cast, how would you handle the situation? Would you divulge all of your top secret information immediately, or wait a bit and see how things play out first? If you are in the position of the audience, of course the first option makes sense given what happened with Ozpin. But, given what the main cast went through in the past 48 hours before arriving in Atlas, they were completely justified in not throwing their trust at Ironwood. I say the past 48 hours because in Volume 6, Chapter 8, Team RWBY arrives in Argus and goes to talk to Cordovan in Chapter 9. Later on in Chapter 9, it's nighttime and we get the statue scene with Jean before going back to the house and deciding on the plan. Chapter 10 shows us the beginning of the plan, and it's the next day. Chapters 10 through 13 all take place during that plan, and when they arrive in Atlas at the end of the episode, it's nighttime. So it's been 48 hours between arriving in Argus, leaving Argus, and arriving in Atlas. Regardless, the main cast was already on edge because of Cordovan and the Leviathan, so them not trusting Ironwood right away makes perfect sense. Granted, given the time skip that happens in Chapter 5, I think Ironwood proved he was trustworthy, but still, RWBY waited until the dinner party in Chapters 8 and 9 to tell him. Now, something that I've glossed over in this video so far is something I want to touch on now before we get into Ironwood's character shift. Robin Hill and the Happy Huntresses. In Volume 7, we are introduced to the Happy Huntresses. Throughout the entire volume, the only thing Robin and the other girls cared about was helping Mantle. They weren't receiving help from Atlas, so they took matters into their own hands, directly helping citizens and providing them with whatever help they require, which led them to being branded as vigilantes. We don't know how long the Happy Huntresses have been around, but we can assume Ironwood has been butting heads with them since the borders closed. Now, let's talk about this more in depth for a bit, because this is one of many reasons why I get annoyed whenever people say that the main cast lying to Ironwood made no sense. During the first half of Volume 7, Ironwood's plan was to get Amity up into the atmosphere so they can tell the rest of Remnant about Salem and come together as a unified force. So the main cast assists him by clearing out the mine in Chapter 3 with the Aesops and bringing supplies to the construction site. But we learned in Chapter 5 that supplies meant to help repair the outer wall in the city of Mantle were instead being used to build Amity. Now, I don't know about you, but if I was the one trying to keep a city safe, and I found out that the city I am protecting is purposefully being left defenseless to build some unknown project in the middle of nowhere, I would be pretty suspicious too. But instead, Ironwood and a big chunk of RWBY critics instantly brand Robin as a nuisance and a bitch. I will probably make a video all about Robin in the future, but the hate that she receives is definitely not warranted in the slightest. Especially in the context of her trying to help Mantle, and Ironwood continuously screwing her over at every single turn. But, let's keep going. So, Yang and Blake tell Robin about Amity, and Robin confronts him about it during the Jock interrogation in Chapter 9. This sets up a chain reaction that we don't see fully until Chapter 11. But now, let's talk about what this whole video has been building up to. Ironwood finally snapping. This was foreshadowed heavily in Chapter 7 when Ironwood and Oscar were in the vault. Ironwood touches the control panel for the elevator, and we see he starts to hallucinate the computer screens from Beacon showing the symbol of the Black Queen virus. During the hallucination, he says, "When Salem hit Beacon, even with all my ships, all my soldiers, I was no match for her. I've never felt so helpless. The way she told me she was there." And then it ends. That sequence told you all you needed to know about where Ironwood is mentally. He still thinks about what happened at Beacon like it was yesterday. He still feels like he failed miserably despite him trying his best. He even comments on how Salem never had to show her face to make him fear her. This sequence leads directly into the finale. Let's go through this scene beat by beat and you will see what I've been trying to say this whole time. During Chapter 11, when we get two of the best fights in the entire show, The latter half of the episode goes like this. Ironwood comes into his office holding Watts' bag with his other arm in a sling. He then sees something on his desk, causing him to drop the bag. We later find out that Cinder placed a black queen chess piece on his desk. He placed a black glass chess piece on his desk, the black queen. Ironwood starts by saying, "We've made a critical error," before showing the piece. He then says, "The black queen was the symbol Salem showed us before we lost everything. Her way of telling us she was inside. We stopped Watts. We stopped Callows, but someone was here. They put this in my office to tell me that... What if Mantle was just a distraction? What if it was just to draw us away from the academy? To which then Weiss tries to comfort him, saying, "Sir, it's going to be okay. We've got Mantle on our side now," and then Ironwood cuts her off, saying, "How do we know that wasn't part of their plan? How do we know they didn't want us to bring people into Atlas by the thousands?" The tail end of the conversation plays out with Ironwood saying the enemy has been one step ahead of them the entire time, and RWBY pointing out that Cinder was the one who made the Black Queen. We then get the scene with Salem projecting into the room before leaving, and Ironwood telling Team RWBY that Winter is going to get the Maiden Power and the staff so they can raise Atlas into the atmosphere. Now, I know that was a lot of information, but really think about what we just went over. The entire volume, Ironwood was trying his best to help Atlas while heavily neglecting Mantle, and when they were at the end of the plan, all they had to do was finish Amity. That's all they had to do. They were at the end of the plan. It took one action, a single second, to erase all of that from his mind and make him dive headfirst into paranoia. The scene in Chapter 7, combined with the entire ending of Chapter 11, shows that his character shift makes perfect sense. He was already on edge but never showed it. Subconsciously, he was waiting for something to go wrong. He knew that things were going too smoothly. That's why when confronted with the truth that he didn't account for every variable, he broke. He became set in his own plan and refused to budge from it in any way. What makes this entire video even more tragic is that if he would have stopped for even a moment during Volume 8 and actually tried to think of an alternative plan, he would have been fine right now. He would be alive and well. Instead, the last thing anyone saw of him was him threatening to blow up the entire city of Mantle in a desperate attempt to get the main cast to conform to his plan or suffer the consequences for not doing so. James Ironwood is a character that I really enjoyed seeing on screen. He was an interesting character. He was compassionate, he was wise, he was collected, he had rational thought. But when confronted with fear, it overtook him and it became too much. If you recall Ozpin's speech from the Volume 7 finale, where fear is not what we should be, fear itself is not what we should be afraid of. It is who we become while fear has us, is what we should be afraid of. Because when confronted with fear and getting over fear, the one thing we should ask ourselves is, are we going to be able to look at ourselves and be proud of who we are after the fact? Or will it eventually swallow us and we will become the one thing that we should have avoided, we should have been afraid of in the first place? But continuing on from that, like I said, Ironwood is a great character. He's the perfect example of a great leader being consumed by fear and corrupted by stubbornness. Hopefully, when the series reaches its eventual conclusion, and to borrow a quote from Ozpin, all the headmasters, Ironwood included, will be remembered for their great deeds they did when they were alive, and not the fatal missteps they took in the end. Thank you all so much for watching this video, and making it all the way to the end. I know it was kind of long, but as you saw, there was a lot to cover, but I hope you enjoyed it nonetheless. Also, I hope that you have a better understanding of Ironwood and why he's such a great character that became his own worst enemy in the end. The next video I will release will be about Yang, because I've seen some critics on Twitter bringing up some really old nonsense from like volume 5 and 6 that I really feel needs to be debunked once and for all, so we can just get on with our lives and we don't have to keep repeating the same nonsensical bullcrap that we've heard for the past 4 years. Anyway, hope you guys are excited for that one. If you made it to the end of this video and you haven't seen my timeline video about how long it's been since the fall of Beacon, you can go watch that. It's down below, or you can just watch the video right before this one on my channel. And yeah, hope you all are excited for the next one. And until next time, stay safe and stay lovely.